It's traditional to start any good preacher with this joke. I didn't have one, but I thought of one. It's a Zimbabwean joke. It's actually been on Facebook recently, so you may have actually seen it. But if you know in Zim, there's kind of the roads are in a dreadful state and there's potholes everywhere. And the joke is, how can you tell if someone's a drunk driver in Zimbabwe? And the answer is, they drive in a straight line. It's actually true as well. We saw one or two. And Lawrence would say, that one's drunk. A bit scary. I want to talk this morning, really, it's actually based on a word that Jamie brought for me. It's a kids' work thing. We were doing we'd had a good kids' day, Children's Leaders' Day, and we sat down and we, and sort of heard God for one another. And Jamie had this picture for me. Can you put the next one up? Oh, I can do it, can't I? And he said, God, I've got a picture of a road. In fact, I've got a picture of two roads. And there's one road, and it's an easy road. And it's a good road, and it's fine. It's going well. It's a good place to be. But next to it, there's a parallel road. And this parallel road is a difficult road. It's more challenging. And he's saying it's almost like he was saying God was giving you this choice to move from the easy road to the more challenging road. And when I look at what's happened to me since then, at the time I was doing doulas and I was doing children's work, and it was going well. Foundation course, you asked John said, yeah, it's going well. But there was something more that God was saying I had for you. You could choose to get off this little easy thing, which at the start became challenging, but now was less challenging, and move into something else, which was going to be more challenging. And this kind of year's opened up. I've been to Zimbabwe twice this year. We're off again abroad to visit Claudia and Augusto next week. And just the opportunities that God has suddenly put in our way, which have resulted from challenges that obviously have been presented to us, that have taken us out of the little comfort and safe place into a place that was less safe and more challenging, but actually been significantly more rewarding, and I think it's had an impact on who we are as people. And I thought about the picture and I thought, well, okay, that's fine, it's great, but is there any scriptural basis for this? Does God actually do that? Does God say, you're on this road, but actually you can move on to this road? So I started to think, well, are there any people or stories of people in the Bible where they've had those experiences, where they had a choice to make? Unfortunately, the ones I could think of mostly were where they made the wrong choice, and actually it was an easy road, and they kind of stayed on the easy road. On the other hand, it's really helpful to learn from other people's mistakes. So I thought that it would be good to look at some of these guys and see, well, what are the things, what are the challenges that might cause us to choose to not stay on that easy road, to choose to stay on the easy road and not move to the hard road. Now, you may just find a slight link with the spirit of adventure here, in that, the adventurous road is obviously this one. So what are the things that might hold us back or cause us to hesitate from moving forward into the things that God has given us? Things are good, things are going well, potential of achieving is great, but there's something more that God has for us. And what do we need to do to adjust in that? The first guy that I wanted to look at was Barak. Barak was a commander of the army of Israel in Judges under Deborah. This will tell the story far better. It's actually Judges 4, and this is the story in 3 minutes.
Though the children of Israel had conquered much of the land, the Canaanites oppressed them, and the general Sisera continued to march forward. No one person had taken it upon themselves to defeat Sisera. For who could? Not just any random citizen.
Who are you calling random?
But could a general? Or a prophet?
Barak.
What is it this time?
You must take 10,000 men to the Kishon River, where you will find Sisera and his army. God will deliver him into your hands.
Sisera? Have you seen his army? Iron chariots. What do we have compared to that?
God.
Okay. We'll go. But only if you come with us.
I'll come along, but know this. The victory will not belong to you. People will say that a woman defeated Sisera. Rise! This is the day that God gives Sisera into your hands.
Every last one of the Canaanites was destroyed, except one.
I gotta get out of here.
Exhausted, Sisera arrived at a random citizen's tent, looking for help.
I'm not random. I have a stake in this matter.
Heba, I need help.
My husband's not home. What's wrong?
The battle. The Israelites are decimating us. Tell your husband we need his help. It's time for you to choose sides.
Oh, we've chosen sides.
We're just letting him get away?
He won't get away.
I thought you
I
would.
said a woman would finish him. I didn't say it would be me.
Thanks for letting me hide here.
Shh. Just get some sleep.
I just thank you for the milk. If anyone comes to your tent and asks if there's a man here, you must say there is no one.
And so, because of one random citizen, with the incredible act by the amazing Yael, the land was at peace for 40 years, until the Israelites started sinning again.
So it's in the Bible. It's okay. Should I have warned you? The thing about... I actually don't think the image of Barak there probably quite fits totally, because it makes me look like a bit of a dork, and I think a man that commands 10,000 people and was prepared to go to war against a king that's got 900 chariots isn't a dork. But there was something there that he actually missed, which meant the whole glory, the all that God had, the best that God had for him, he didn't actually access. I mean, the glory went to a woman. How bad is that? I mean, but the point is that what's happened is that he didn't actually access the faith that God had for him, for himself. So, although Deborah had faith, she brought the word, she brought the commands. But what he did, he went on the basis of what he'd heard from somebody else. What he didn't do was press in and access, what has God got for me in this? And what we have to do is that when God brings us a word in a direction, it might come through John, it's something that's coming through the church, there's a grace there for us to get hold of. But I have to press in and say, God, I need faith for this myself. I need to know what you're saying. What are you giving me for this purpose? Let me explain what I mean. If I've got kids' work to do, and I was kind of... Debbie's not here, so she doesn't need to hear this bit. But I'm kind of thinking, well, I've got lots of other things I'm doing now. Have I got time to continue with children's work? And when I first started children, I don't just do it because it's something that I've been given to do. It's something I did because God's put something in my heart to do. And we went and David called us to come over for coffee, she said, yesterday. And I've not seen her new kitchen. So we went over and had coffee with Debbie yesterday. And we got chatting. And she said, actually, I was wondering if you could do this. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking of not doing this. Now she wants me to do this. But what I found myself doing was thinking, hey, actually, yeah, maybe I could do that and what she's asking me to do as well. Maybe I could do both things. Because there was something of the faith that was in her that was communicated to me that I was able to catch hold of and think, actually, this is mine as well. I can make this my own. And there's something that God gives us to do that as the word comes, there's a part for us in positioning ourselves to access what God's given us. And sometimes we have to pursue it. You know, that's why we do ministry training. It's why we do doulos. These are places where we can go, where we can start to pursue and access the things that God is saying and God's giving us to do. Because as they come, as the word comes, there's the grace, but I need to pursue it and make it my own. I don't just do it because someone else is doing it. I didn't just go to, when I went to Africa, we went to Zim last time, and there was a question about whether there might be riots there, and before we went. And I spoke to John about it, and John says, no, it'll be fine. Now, I could just go and say, John says it'll be fine, so I've got nothing to worry about. But actually, that wasn't quite how I was feeling. It actually brought me to a place where I had to say, well, no, God, what are you saying to me? And Sue and I looked at it together, and we came to that place where we felt, yeah, God is saying, for myself, I knew it was my conviction. I had to go. There was no choice. I had to be there. If there was a riot while I was there, there was a riot while I was there. I had to go because that's what was God put in my heart to do. But it didn't start with me. It started with being sent. But as I got sent, then I had to press into God and access it for myself. And that is what he didn't do. And because he didn't actually achieve everything that God had for him to actually do. Second person is Moses. This I'm going to have to read. It's a bit small up there. Moses, when he was in the desert, and there was a burning bush, and he got called, and God gave him a call to move out into Israel. And he gave him a call to lead the Israelites out of Egypt to in captivity and take them into the promised land. Now, Moses was an amazing guy. He was so amazing that in the Transfiguration, Jesus and Elijah were... Jesus, the Transfiguration with Jesus, Moses and Elijah were both there alongside Jesus to comfort him. It wasn't that Moses was a failure, but he never made it to the promised land. And I think that there's something in the first story here where he actually was something that just didn't quite grab hold of. And what happened was that God said to him, Moses, I want you to go and speak to Pharaoh. I want you to lead out and set my people free. And Moses didn't go. He says, I can't go. And he could, all the excuses he had under the sun. One of them was, God even gave him signs and he had this stick, throw your stick down, it becomes a snake, pick it up again, it comes back to a stick, it will be a sign to you. What was interesting on that one was, I thought, well, if that's fine, throw it down, becomes a snake. He needed quite a lot of faith to pick the snake back up again, really. So it wasn't that he was wimpish in that sense, but he said, I can't go and speak. I have a stammer. I can't do it. And God in the end said, well, I'll send your brother instead and he can come with you and he'll be my mouthpiece. Now, I think that was something that Moses carried with him. And the reason why he didn't go to Promised Land wasn't because of that incident, but something else that happened later. And he was on the good road, but there was somewhere, and he made lots of good things, but there was a harder road. There was something else. If he'd actually made that decision that, God, I'm going to go because you said go in obedience to you, and not because of the fact that, why about my stammer, then that's fine. Now, the weaknesses in me can often become my excuses or my perceived weaknesses for not doing the thing that God gives me to do. And they can be my own weaknesses, they can be my own perception, I can't do that because. It can be sometimes things that other people suggest is a weakness. I had a hip replacement last year, and I used to go to the physio, and the physio says, right, well, you've got to be really careful. He says, you won't be able to, mustn't bend your leg beyond a certain level. So I said to her, that means I'll never be able to do it with my shoelaces. And she says, no, that's probably true. You might find a way. And there was this whole series, you mustn't sit down on the floor this way. This is how you get on and how you get up. And I just didn't register with me that I should be living with that kind of limitation. So I didn't take notice. And I actually go to the gym twice a week now, and I'm going to the gym twice, doing more exercises now at the gym than I was doing before I had the operation. And because they were putting this restriction on me. I don't think about how I get up on the floor. I was thinking when I'm doing kids work, I won't be able to get on the floor with the kids, how will I get up? I don't think about it. I just get on with it. In fact, I forget that I've got actually got the issue there at all. And it was a limitation that was being put onto me. Sometimes external things. People can say things which would cause you to feel limited. But actually we can step out into what it doesn't matter what the perception is. We do the thing that God's giving us to do. Sometimes it can be our own perceptions. When we were in Zim last time, when we went on the team, Lance's expectations are absolutely enormous. You know, you just ooze the expectation of what we were going to bring. And I got there on Monday and I thought, I can't do this. I can't match the expectation that he has here. You know, he thinks I'm like John, and I can't be like John. I need to be like John. I'm not John. And it was the one wobble I had the whole time, was the sense that, you know, I can't actually speak this. I can't be this person. I can't be to Lawrence the person he needs me to be. I can't do this. But God had said do it. And I remember delivering that first session and feeling it was probably the worst session I did. And he came up to me afterwards and he says, you know, it was fantastic. You know, it really hit that impact of this and the impact of that. And my perception was totally different to what God was saying. And sometimes we will hold back from doing the things that God gives us to do because we look at our own limitations. And we see our limitations. Our limitations do not stop us doing the things that God's giving us to do. In fact, actually, when we move out into adventure, I think that God uses those circumstances to actually deal with our limitations. I'm going to give another plug for Doulos, because that's what Doulos is. All right? Doulos is a place where people choose to, they feel inadequate, you might not feel I'm up to it, and I think there's people here that are feeling that at the moment. I can't do Doulos because I'm not adequate. But actually, it's the process of actually stepping out in response to what God is saying is the place where we see release and freedom, and we get set free from the things that are holding us back and that we see as our weaknesses. Because God is stronger than our weaknesses. God is stronger than our limitations. And if he says go, we go. We do it. And he will actually deal with the consequences. The third person I want to look at is Abraham and Lot. So this is the third scenario. And is it better to play it straight off the USB? This is another story which I've put up for you in.
So here's the story from the Bible that you are going to hear about today. It's about a man named Abram and a man named Lot. Now, Abram was rich. Like, really, really, really rich. Now, rich in Abram's time, though, didn't mean he had a huge bank account filled with money. It meant he had servants, sheep, camels, cows, and even goats. Told you, rich. Now, years before, Abram's nephew, named Lot, had come to live with Abram. Lot became quite rich as well with, well, servants, sheep, camels, cows, and yes, goats. So, let's do a quick review, shall we? We've got two men, Abram and Lot, and both were very rich. Now, each spring, many more animals were born and added to the herd, which means more, and more, and more, and more, and more sheep and other animals were added to the herd. Now, both Abram and Lot's herds grazed on the hillside together. The problem is they kept growing and growing and growing and growing, leaving very little room left for all of the animals to use the land together. Abram's servants and Lot's servants began arguing over the land where the animals grazed. Abram's servants wanted the best land, but so did Lot's servants. Now, Abram heard all this arguing going on between the servants, and he knew that these arguments had to stop. So Abram thought and thought and thought and thought, and he came up with a good idea. It was time for Abram and Lot to go their separate ways. The question then began, where would Abram and Lot go? You see, they had two choices. They could go east or they could go west. But the thing is the east had the better land. It was absolutely beautiful, and it had the Jordan River right there. The east was the land that wanted to be picked. Now, Abram could have said, I want to pick my land first. But he didn't say that. Instead, he said, Lot, you go ahead and pick your land first. Well, Lot decided to be very selfish and said, I want the east. So that's what happened. Abram and Lot headed in their separate directions. Now, once this happened, God talked to Abram and told him to look north, south, east, and west. God promised Abram that all the land that he could see would belong to his children and grandchildren. Now, you may ask, what does this have to do with love?
Nothing. Okay, that's not the point I'm trying to make. But the point I am trying to make is that's a bit more complex, that story, because it looks like the person that made the choice was Abraham, not Lot. But actually, I don't think that's the case. I think at the very start, Abraham was told by God, you need to take all your family, take all your belongings, and you just go. He didn't tell you he was going. Lot went with him. Lot did well. Lot set off on a good road. He was going where God wanted him to, where God was taking Abraham. He stood alongside him. It was good. But it got to a point here, what's actually happened here is that Lot was left with a choice. And the choice he had to make was he going to deal with the conflict that was happening with his shepherds, with Abraham's shepherds, or was he going to leave? And it actually got to the point where Abraham had to say to Lot, you need to go. But actually, if Lot had actually dealt with it in the first place, if he'd actually dealt with the problem and resolved the problem, then he could have stayed with Abraham, because Abraham was at a transitional point there. He was at a point where he was moving on to a hard road, but where God was saying it's all going to belong to you. You can have it all. But because Lot didn't deal with the problem, because he didn't deal with the issue that was there, then he wasn't Abraham in the end. Abraham started to go. So he wasn't able to take or pick up onto the adventure that God had for him. He missed out because he wouldn't deal with the hard things. And I think the other thing that can hinder, one of the other things that can hinder us is that is dealing with the hard things. That can prevent us from actually moving on with what God has us to do. When I was teaching, I had one person who was a member. I was head of science, so I had different departments that were the heads of department. And I had one head of department who was a little bit incompetent, and but worse than that, he was really awkward, really difficult. And I went to the school, and things changed, and God blessed, and there was quite some good things that were happening. But this bloke wasn't changing. Nothing was changing. And what had happened was that people just, if something's difficult, people just get on, move, just adjust their careers and their lives around the person and just leave the thing as it is and just get on. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't let it rest. I'm in charge of this department, and I couldn't let it rest that I had someone in my department that was causing and dragging us down. It had to be dealt with. And so I had to confront it, and I confronted him, and he was awkward and he was difficult. He was a union man. I went to the head. The head decided there was a personality clash between me and him, so that didn't actually help because then I was the problem, he wasn't the problem. And eventually we got to the point where the light clicked on with the head and the guy got demoted. We had to go to disciplinary meetings, and I had to sit through holds of meetings. It was hard, this was. I could have at any point just said, well, stuff it. I'll go to work, do my job, come home. But I couldn't. It wasn't in my heart. It wasn't the way that it could be. I couldn't, in integrity or in terms of what I was trying to see expressed to the children there, allow this situation to continue. So it had to be dealt with. And the guy in the end got demoted, which wasn't made life any easier because he still stayed the final 12 years I was there and hated me for 12 years. So, it wasn't kind of the best scenario, but you learn to work with it and make it all work. But what I'm trying to say is that there were difficult situations. There may be relationship issues that we have to resolve, and it's quite easy. We can build walls around them and just ignore them. But they're the things that prevent us from actually moving into the things that God has for us to deal with. It can be family, it can be work, it can be in church, it can be, it can be in marriage, it could be anything really that we choose to ignore, and it can be a thing that doesn't move on. I think the other hard things sometimes are the mundane. You know, it's the time when you've got to sit down for 2 hours and prepare something. John asked us to go and do African do last. I've got to have meetings with Neil, meetings with Martin. You know, that's hard. And then we have to... no. And then we have to... and then you go away and you're sitting down in front of your computer and you're preparing stuff, and then you bring it back and you check it, and Martin says, I don't like that. You need to go back and change it. And you know, that's hard. And sometimes just that mundane of the things that God gives us to do, pressing in, is difficult. Years and years ago, when I was living in Tottenham, when we were doing kids' work and youth work, and I used to go around 6:30, I used to drive round and pick up all these youth. Then I used to drive from Tottenham all the way over to Charlotte Road in Dagenham. Then we used to run the youth event. Then I'd put them in my car and then take them all the way to the back again and drop them all off again. And that was after having done a week's work in school when I was just beginning my career teaching. And, you know, it wasn't easy, but it's something that God had put in my heart to do. And sometimes I think the other thing we need to look at is sometimes we just think it's just too much hard work. I can't be bothered with this. But actually, we need to be bothered. We need to press in. Because it's that pressing in, or lacking of pressing in, that prevents us from actually moving into the things that God has for us. I'll leave that a bit. So, it's quite interesting just to see what Paul has to say about hard. I found this quite interesting. I happened to be reading this. I'll come back to that bit in a minute. I can skip this bit. I'm going to say, why are we in this church? You know, we're in this church because God has called us to be part of this church. I'm here because God's called me to be here. That's why I'm here. You know, in Acts it says that God has added those who be saved. I've been added. I can choose to embrace that as much as I want or not embrace it. But God has added me to be part of this church. And if I've been added, then I kind of feel that I'm under obligation to pursue diligently all that God's calling us to do. And it was quite interesting what Paul says about heart. I'll just read this out. We don't want you in the dark, friends. This is Paul writing to the Corinthians about how hard it was when all this came down on us in Asia province. It was so bad, we didn't think we were going to make it. We felt like we'd been sent to death row, that it was all over for us. As it turned out, it was the best thing that could ever have happened. Instead of trusting in our own strength or wits to get out of it, we were forced to trust God totally. Not a bad idea, since he's the God who raises the dead. And he did it. He rescued us from certain doom, and he'll do it again, rescuing us as many times as we need rescuing. And I think there's a place of coming to that you know, things may go wrong, but God will rescue me, and he will keep doing it. Because actually what it brings me to is a new place of trust and confidence in him. That was kind of an aside. So how do we get to this road of adventure? How do we choose to stay on it? The first thing is we need to own what God is saying to us for ourselves. I need to claim it. I need to make it mine. And I need to say, you know, God, what are you saying for me? And I need to do whatever I need to pursue that. So if somebody brings a word on a Sunday and you think, I need to catch more of that, go and talk to them about it. Pursue the person. You know, bring it up with your group leader. Bring it up with your youth leader. Say, look, God's challenged me on this. I don't quite understand this. I'm not quite what God's saying. Pursue it through. Obviously, talk to God yourself about it. But this sense of not just letting the thing fly by, but actually saying, this is for me. I need to grab hold of this and bring it down. I need to make it mine. You know, and when you get the training opportunities, these are things that we can actually pursue and do, because again, it's part of getting in deeper into what God is saying to us. Obey God and deny our own sense of inadequacy, even if we think it's real. We might be inadequate. You know, Moses said, I have a stammer. Now, a stammer is a stammer. You know, you've got to go and talk to the king of Egypt, and I've got a stammer. He was real. And sometimes there are things that we will perceive and actually are real weaknesses and personal limitations. But it doesn't matter. If God has said go, you go. If God says do it, you do it. Right? I had John, before I flew out to Zim, I had John to pray for me because I had a problem with my ear. Now, the last thing you want is a problem with your ear on 2 long-haul flights. You know, you don't want it. But it wasn't a decision not to go, you know, because I knew in my heart I had to go. I was fine. It's that whatever it is, you just pursue. And the last thing in which we need to deal with the hard things. We need to deal with those things which would obstruct us from doing the things that we know in our heart God is calling us to do. I can't pursue this adventure because I have this difficulty or I have that difficulty. Well, what we need to do is to go to God and look for the grace to actually deal with that. Because if God's word is to go on adventure, then we go on adventure. And we look to him to deal with the hard things. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.